Good morning, everyone. It's great to see you this morning, whether you have been worshiping with us for a long time or visiting us for the first time or following us online. We just want to welcome you here today to worship. I just have a few announcements that I'd like to share. Coming up in 2 weeks, November the 7th, the time changes. And so I just want to get that on everybody's radar now because it can kind of sneak up on you. And we hope that you join us for worship on November 7th, but it would be great to be here at the right time. So we'll be falling back 1 hour Saturday night, on November the 6th, going into the 7th. I also wanted to share with everyone that we're going to be having a congregational meeting coming up on Sunday, November the 21st. It will be between services. Once again, want to get that on people's calendar. We're going to be having the annual reports available for people to pick up and to read on Sunday, November 7th, 2 weeks ahead of time. And we're really trying to figure out an online option if you're joining us virtually this morning. We are still trying to work out the kinks on how like a vote might happen virtually as opposed to in person and how people could ask questions, things like that. But we are working on trying to help make that happen. So that's Sunday, November the 21st, in between services. And finally, I just wanted to share, if you are at all interested in joining me for a week of hurricane relief down in Hammond, Louisiana, the week of January the 30th through Saturday, February 5th, lots of people have expressed an interest, but they would really like to have a more definite commitment at least a month or two before we go. So if you feel like you are at a place that you want to make that commitment to join the 15, I've reserved 15 spots so far, to join me that week. It will be a full week. We'll leave on a Sunday, work Monday through Friday, and then drive back on Saturday. If you want to take that next step, please call me. You can text me, call me, email me. I have all that contact information readily available in the directory. And I'll share with you, how you can register online for our group and how to make that happen. If you've never been on a work trip like this before, it will be an eye-opening and life-changing experience. And hope that you can join us if you are thinking about that. It is a rainy day today, but I hope that you feel the light of Christ and the warmth of God's goodness here in this place as we worship together. Let us worship.
Singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. When I was your foe, Still your love fought for me. You have been so, so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't break down, a lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, no mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, no lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, no mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, no lie you won't tear down, coming after me. The overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God.
Let us be in a time of prayer with one another and with our God. God of the seasons, today is gray. Things are getting colder and losing their leaves and falling asleep. God, sometimes we convince ourselves that we're okay. We tuck ourselves away and we cover ourselves with warm blankets. And we stay right there in the gray and the cold. But God, that's not the end of your story. You help us to know that there is more. That there is yet another season to come. A season of bright skies and rainbows, fresh blooms, new leaves. So God, help us in the seasons of change to always be open to something new, to moving ourselves into a time of renewal. To recognizing that sometimes just being comfortable isn't all we're called to be. God, we are so thankful for the gift of your Son who came and showed us what your love is truly like, full of mercy and grace. Help us to deserve that love. Even though we know when we are not deserving, you still gift it to us. Loving us in our rough places, in our addictions, in our sickness, in our mistakes. Even in the midst of violence, God, you love us and are hoping and praying and nudging and guiding us into new ways of living and life. Help us to be worthy of that love. Help us to seek the light, to bask in its amazing power, and to share what we have learned from the light in our own lives with those around us, helping to guide them out of the dark, to be your hands and feet to all we meet, our friends, our family, this faith community, our wider community, and the world around us, God. You are an amazing God. Help us to know your love in our lives, to know that we are okay, that we are worthy. Help us not to get too comfortable or complacent, God, but to reach out to you, to delve into your word, your story, the life of your Son, that we might better understand who we are and whose we are and what it is we're called to do. Help us to be better disciples, to be better followers, to love one another better. We thank you, God, for the gift of your Son so that our lives can be made new, so that we can be drawn out of the season of gray into a season of light and love and newness. So, God, hear these words as we say them as Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
We find ourselves today in the Gospel of Mark. Jesus heals many blind people during his ministry, and he encounters one such person in today's reading. We're in the 10th chapter of Mark, and he encounters on his way out of Jericho blind Bartimaeus laying beside the road, and he's able to capture his attention and receives sight. And so share along with me. You can read along on the screens as I share with you again the scripture of blind Bartimaeus. Then they came to Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples, together with a crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Now many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." So throwing his cloak aside, he jumped up to his feet and he came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." "Go," said Jesus. "Your faith has healed you." And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the road. God's word for God's people. As I am looking out at all of you fine people today, I am noticing that I am not the only person today wearing glasses. You know, I haven't worn glasses my whole life. In fact, I was on a mission trip down to Haiti, and I was trying to write a text, and I had a hard time focusing in on the screen, and I realized it was probably about time to get my eyes checked again. So it took to my 40s to be able to have glasses for the first time, but I want to tell you about the first friend of mine to receive glasses. This is her story. I remember moving to Florida when I was about 6.5 years old. We had made the trip from Pennsylvania down to Avon Park, which is located in Central Florida, and we didn't arrive before the beginning of the school year. We arrived in early October. And so where other people in my class had a month or so to be able to get to know each other and make friends and have people to play with on the playground, I was coming in fresh and new. And back then, you know, they didn't put brothers together or family members together in classrooms, so I didn't have the comfort of having my identical twin brother in the same classroom as I. But I remember going into Mrs. Simon's class, one of the sweetest teachers I've ever had in my life. I was in the 2nd grade, and she placed me down next to a young woman named Sarah. Now, when I met Sarah for the first time, she wasn't wearing glasses. In fact, I don't think that anybody in my 2nd grade class was wearing glasses. But she was the first person to say hello to me and was friendly to me. And although we haven't been lifelong friends, I remember the difference that she made in my life as a 6.5-year-old, going to a brand new school, living in a brand new state, residing in a brand new city. And I remember how she made me feel on that day. So classes went on, and I could tell from time to time that Sarah would squint at the front of the blackboard. Yes, we didn't have dry erase boards back then. It was blackboards. And sometimes when Mrs. Simon had things for us to copy down, she didn't always get it right. Now, talking to Sarah, I knew from the very first time I met her, she was a bright gal. But yet there was a disconnect. And, you know, my teacher, Mrs. Simon, you know, had the wherewithal to recognize what was going on in young people's lives. And she thought maybe, just maybe, that she might need to get her eyes checked. She knew that she was smart, but she had a trouble seeing the board. And we were about 2/3 to the back of the room. And so she had a talk with Sarah's parents, and they made an eye appointment, and it was going to be a couple weeks. So I remember Sarah moving from the seat beside me up to the front row. And I also remember Mrs. Simon giving Sarah a lot of special attention, making sure that even on the front row that things were copied, that she was able to comprehend everything okay. Life was great in Sarah's life. I mean, she got special attention from the teacher, and who doesn't want that as a 7-year-old? And so she got moved to that front row, into that position of specialness, of prominence. And I got to tell you, I think she loved it there. Being fussed over. I mean, life was good. And then the day came for the appointment, and she had to go to the eye doctor. I remember her being taken out of class early that day, and I can remember her telling me how scared she was to go to the eye doctor because nobody in our classroom had glasses. And she knew how cruel her peers could be, that if she needed them, what life might be like. You know, she had moved from a place that she was set apart, looked at as special by the teacher. You know, why would she want that to change? And so she went to the eye doctor, and of course that was the case. She had to receive glasses. It was going to take about 2 weeks for them to come in. And so she knew that when she went back to class, at least for the next 2 weeks, she was still going to be on the front row. She was going to be still treated special by the teacher. Oh, she fought getting those glasses. I think any 7-year-old would. Because she knew of the names that were going to be coming down the pike. She might have to go back to her old seat next to me, and maybe that's what she was worried about more than anything else. I don't know. And I remember her telling me that on the day that she went back to get them, her begging the eye doctor, "I'm great on the front row. Mrs. Simon is helping me, and I promise if I have any problems, I'll tell my parents, but please don't make me wear glasses." Well, you know the story. She had to wear them, and there were classmates that did call her Four Eyes. And when you first get glasses, like I said, I was in my 40s when I got my glasses for the first time. It takes a while to get used to them. I remember especially having to pay attention when I first got mine on stairs. You just look differently when you go downstairs so you don't trip down, curbs. Now, I don't even realize that they're on anymore. But man, when you first get them, it takes a little while to get used to. But she preferred not having them if it was up to her, keeping that place of specialness being cared for by Mrs. Simon and just staying on the front row. When the glasses finally came, life, at least for a while, became miserable for Sarah. She had to move back to that seat next to me, undergo the ridicule of name calling. She hated it. She really probably would have preferred staying blind. The adjustment was just hard as it would have been for any 7-year-old. It was easier to stay how things were. Now, I'm sure today, Sarah might be wearing contacts by this time. I don't know. But I'm sure today that she's probably happy that her parents and her school teacher and her eye doctor all made the choices that they did in her life. And as someone who has traveled to many countries where that isn't always the case, you feel, the advantage of having that leg up in life. Because I've been to plenty of places where, a child wouldn't have been diagnosed, or if they were diagnosed, there wouldn't have been an eye doctor available, or if there would have been an eye doctor available to test her, the family most likely wouldn't have even had the wherewithal or the means to be able to buy glasses for their young child. It's never better to be blind when you can see. But sometimes we like that escape, don't we? That escape and just staying with what's familiar, with how things are. Sometimes we're just comfortable in our suffering. We're comfortable with what feels and looks familiar. Bartimaeus saw nothing. It doesn't say whether Bartimaeus had been blind since birth or he had undergone an injury later in life, but we know that he was blind and all he could see was darkness, and he probably wondered if that darkness had not become familiar to him, maybe even comforting. We get stuck in what's familiar. I wonder how much his blindness had become a part of his self-understanding of who he is as a person. There is something comforting to have others care for you, isn't it? That's what Sarah experienced, but haven't we all experienced that at some time in life as well? I want you to think back, the adults in the room, I want you to think back to the last time that you were sick in bed and somebody was looking after you. Maybe you have to go all the way back to your childhood to remember such a memory. Yes, you were miserable. Nobody wants to be sick. Certainly nobody wants to be in pain. You wouldn't certainly have chosen to be sick. But wasn't it nice to lie there? Pillows all put around you and plumped up with nothing to do but sleep or read or watch TV or look out a window. Someone's waiting on you hand and foot, bringing you a hot beverage or soup with all the responsibility removed. I remember as a kid, when you were sick, it might have felt miserable, but you didn't have the burden of turning in homework for a time or going to school. All your responsibility is lifted on you and it's placed on someone else, or it's kicked on down the road for you to deal with it. All your worries are put on hold until you get better. And even us as independent adults, there's something that I long for from time to time, to let someone else handle everything for a moment in time. To be dependent for a while, even if it's just a little while. We can retreat at those times from the hard realities of our adult life, put everything on pause, and temporarily return to the feeling of being cared for and looked after that we had as children. During the COVID lockdown, I heard of people just talking about how rough that was, but at the same time, how it forced us to just pause for a moment and just be. Mark tells us that Jesus was already on the road to Jerusalem with not only his disciples, but a large crowd of people following him. He was leaving Jericho, and Bartimaeus was sitting on the road outside of Jericho when he heard many people approaching in the distance. He must have heard that a crowd was coming down the road, or maybe people talking. I can picture Bartimaeus grabbing the hem of someone passerby to find out who's coming, who's on their way. I hear this big crowd. And when he learned that a famous healer and teacher and holy man was approaching, I wondered if he struggled within himself, wondered if he dared ask for help on that particular day, wondering if he even wanted to ask for help. Was he afraid that he might receive sight if he asked for it? Was he afraid he might not? I bet you there's a part of Bartimaeus, at least, that was agonizing over his decision, over his dilemma to do something or not. In fact, if he did something, it was going to call attention to himself and his situation. And sometimes we just like to hide away and be a bit anonymous. And so he hears Jesus approaching, and at once he makes the decision to cry out. Maybe he'll hear him. It has an exclamation point at the first time that he cries out, but I wonder how loud it really was, because we know he does it a second time. He cries out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me!" Exclamation point. So we know at least he's trying to shout. And even when the crowd and the disciples tried to keep him quiet, he shouts again even louder. I wonder if his conviction grew between the first time he shouted and the second time. "Son of David, have mercy on me!" And to the surprise, perhaps maybe even his horror, some people came and told him that Jesus had asked them to bring him to Christ. So Mark tells us that he threw off his cloak before he leaped to his feet, perhaps to face this healer without this covering over his face that he would have worn over his head. Even though he couldn't see, it was signified to others that he was blind. And when Jesus asked him what he wanted, Bartimaeus just answered, "My teacher, let me see again." For better, for worse, he had chosen sight over blindness. And in the next instant, he could see. He was blind no more. Jesus heals him. Now, Mark tells us Bartimaeus followed Jesus on the way out of Jericho to Jerusalem. So we know, as people of faith who know the story, where that leads to a place of waving palms and triumphal entry where people are welcoming in throngs. There's a confrontation that happens at the temple where Jesus gets angry and drives out the money changers. There's this last meal that happens with his friends that happens over Passover. It was a road that he followed Christ on that would lead to his arrest, him being humiliated, to suffering, to death, but it would also lead to Easter morning, to glory not only for him and his followers, but for us today. Bartimaeus followed him on that way into life, and it was the kind of life that he probably could have never possibly dreamed of had he just sat there and done nothing? Just a blind beggar. Bartimaeus used his sight to follow Jesus, literally and figuratively, on his way to becoming a disciple himself. And so today, what I want to lift up is, we want to marvel at the grace that God gives Bartimaeus, given so plentifully to this poor blind beggar. But I'm here to tell you, for me, the real miracle was not in the healing. It wasn't in granting sight to one who was blind. Helen Keller says that ignorance is much worse than being blind. Do some people who are blind even see blindness as a disability at all? I've encountered groups of people who are totally deaf. And when I've asked them would they want to hear, many of them would say no. They said, the world that we understand outside of our deafness is pretty noisy. I kind of like things the way they are. I think it challenges me to think, what we call a disability is sometimes just life. And so to me, the real miracle was not that Bartimaeus physically was healed of his physical blindness. The real miracle was that God gave him the strength to get up from his position and ask for help in the first place. And I tell you, I think that's the hardest message for all of us sitting here today. It's not that a blind person was given their sight back. It was that first Jesus gave this person the courage to ask for help in the first place. Because all too often, those of us who need help, we have a hard time asking for it, don't we? That's where the connection happens. We have a hard time asking for help in our life. Do you know that the majority of couples who go to marriage counseling end up getting divorced anyway? And do you know why? Because they wait far too long to ask for help. The average couple waits 3 years after they start seeing that there's a problem. So by the time they go and talk to a marriage counselor, one of the two most likely has already mentally checked out. In other words, they want to just check that off their list. Well, we tried this and it didn't work. But both parties have to be invested in making that marriage better. They wait too long to ask for help. How about when there's medical stuff going on with us? We know our bodies better than anybody else. We don't oftentimes have to have a doctor tell us that something different is going on with us. I knew when I was looking at my phone trying to send a text and I couldn't see as well as I could have before that I probably should go and check in with an eye doctor, get my eyes checked. But all too often we put it off. How many times a day do physicians tell someone, if we just would have been able to get at this earlier. But we don't. We don't ask for help. Battered women, if you go to any battered women's shelter, most of the women will tell you that they stayed in that situation far, far longer than they should have. They were comfortable in the familiar, not in getting hit or beaten, but the familiarity of how their life was being organized. In other words, to get out of that relationship meant taking a step into the unknown. And so you stay in suffering, and that which is familiar, rather than go down a new path. The real miracle is not the blindness being healed. The real miracle is Bartimaeus gaining the courage of Jesus' presence to ask for help in the first place. Bartimaeus could have sat in silence as Jesus passed by. That was his choice. He could have obeyed the crowd's orders that he be quiet after his first outburst. He didn't have to say something a second time. And when they came to bring him to Jesus, he could have just refused. But he was granted the courage to ask for help and to keep asking and to get up and to go and to meet Jesus. And so what does that say about us? Because we might not be physically blind, most of us today, but there's lots of things that we probably need help on. Where do you identify yourself in the story? Because there's a lot of drama going on here. In some ways, I'm just like the general crowd. I don't want to bother someone as busy as Jesus is, and that's how we oftentimes explain away us asking for help. He's way too important or too busy to be concerned with me. Or maybe we're like the disciples, we're okay and willing to run errands for Jesus, but still without a clue about what Jesus' ministry is all about and who he really is. But I tell you, there's a part of all of us that is very much like Bartimaeus. Spiritually blind, groping for faith and understanding, wanting to have something better, but not wanting the help to be able to get there. Wanting to have the Spirit come alive in our lives and to gain greater understanding, but don't want to put the work in to make that next step. And yet fearing the profound, because we fear the profound changes that such a gift, such an ask would mean in our lives. And so today, my challenge is to you is to not concentrate as much on Bartimaeus, who happened to be blind, having sight restored. The real miracle is Jesus giving Bartimaeus the courage to ask for help in the first place. And so there is someone coming into your life right now. If you're willing to ask for that help that is coming to you and it wants to say to you, cheer up, get on your feet, because today Jesus is calling you. And that's good news. Thanks be to God. Amen.
When Mike and I first came to St. Paul's, we recognized that there were several people worshiping with us on a regular basis that didn't have a good place to plug into a small group ministry. And because of that, we formed a group for developmentally disabled adults. And they have named themselves the Dog Group. Bow wow. And that stands for Disciples of God, or just representing that we are reflections of God. And through the general offering, because we're in the budget, you help to support our activities that we do on a regular basis. And we were able to go in September to Lake Salatisca and actually have 4 days of camp. And during that time, the Dog Group wanted to say thank you. And they have, with Savannah's help, created this beautiful video. We're going to bless our offering by watching this video, but you can give on your way out. You can always give online through sp4u.org in our giving tab, or you can send a check to St. Paul's at 5508 Telegraph Road, St. Louis, 63129. Thanks. Enjoy this video.
Thank you, St. Paul's, for supporting our dog, our Disciples of God group, and for loving everyone in our congregation. The contributions that you make to the dog group, the way that you treat them when they come to church, the way you make them a part of our family, it really matters. It matters to them, it matters to us, and it makes us a better congregation overall.
Thank you, St. Paul's Church members, for giving money to the dog group. We appreciate you. We love you. Thank you very much.
Since I've been in this group, I mean, it's like family to me, and I really appreciate what they do. I mean, this is the first time I've been with a group like this.
I just wanted to say I wanted to thank the members at St. Paul's Church that donated money. Thank you for the T-shirts we got. That was a lot of fun. And I also enjoyed going on the paddle boats with my friend Kim, and we got a little tippy and we went in circles, but we had a blast and laughed and laughed and laughed. So thank you for all of your support.
Actually, I love this group again. Yeah, I really love it. I love dog group.
I feel so blessed to be part of the dog group. They are the most amazing, caring, and loving men and women to be around. The world would be a better place if there were more people like the dog group.
I like being in the dog group, being with a lot of my friends and having a lot of fun. And I appreciate Pastor Erica and the rest of them for helping me out this week down at camp. And I had a lot of fun.
I just want to say this is the most loving group of people I've ever been around, and it is such a pleasure to be with them. Everybody at St. Paul's should be proud.
I like to be in the dog group with my friends, and I like Pastor Erica, and she's nice, and I like her.
The reason why I love coming to dog group because the friends, the arts and crafts we get to do, and all the fun stuff, and meet new friends and hang out.
Thank you so much, St. Paul's, for your support for the dog group. As a parent who has a daughter in the group, she loves it, I love it, and their camaraderie is amazing. Thank you so much for your support.
My favorite thing about the dog group is the activities like swimming, boating, fishing, and I just love joining the dog group. It's so much fun. And I love St. Paul's Church. I love being a member.
I like coming to church for the dog group.
Just thank you very much. So
Thank you to support us. Thank you.
You know, the real miracle is Jesus giving Bartimaeus the courage to ask for help. And that's what Jesus is empowering you to do today. Because what we all should be learning in life as people of faith is that we all need help. And God has someone right there willing to step in if you just reach out. May God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you, be gracious to you. May God lift up God's countenance upon you and bring you peace. And the mission of St. Paul's is to be a place of worship, refuge, and outreach. Have a great week, my friends.